Hello everybody, it's the Game Judge here, and Obsidian just dropped a 27-minute deep dive video about their upcoming RPG game Avowed, with new details about gameplay, story, lore, companions in the game, combat, skills, classes, attributes. I'm super excited to talk about these things, and there's a lot to unpack here. And the first bit of news I want to talk about here is, up to this point, we had only seen footage of a first-person POV in Avowed, and this was something I was concerned about because I feel like Obsidian was really missing out on a potentially big audience by limiting Avowed to first person. Well, thankfully they squashed that concern because they confirmed that there's not only going to be a first person POV, but a third person POV as well.
See here, I'll just call
third person,
out.
yeah.
Yes, we do have third person. A lot of the footage we're going to see today is in first person, but we do have a third person option for players who prefer it.
Now, I think this was a very, very smart move by Obsidian, and it will definitely give Avowed a wider reach. I have to say, well done here. The next bit I want to talk about here is the combat. Now, people, including myself, in a prior Avowed video did express concern about the impact of your weapons, because it just kind of felt like the weapons were real kind of swift moving, but they weren't really hitting the enemies with the impact that you want to see that made you like really feel the weapon in your hands. Well, it appears Obsidian listened and they heard us because they addressed this particular issue here.
After Developer Direct, one of the things that I know folks called out that we spent a lot of additional time on was refining that sense of hitting, which we're going to see some of in our footage today.
And of course, I had to test this to see if it was true. So here's the old Avowed combat footage that we had.
Is our dual wielding system. Basically, the player has two.
And here's the new footage.
Yatsley, who is going to be one of our other companions.
And you were charging.
To me, it does appear like the weapons are more impactful when hitting the enemies. Again, I think this is another awesome and smart move by Obsidian, and I like that they're taking the feedback and addressing these issues that people expressed with the prior footage that they showed us of Avowed. So, moving on to some more juicy Avowed details, and in this next part, I want to talk about the new information they gave us regarding how the leveling and progression system is going to work in Avowed. First things first is Obsidian mentioned weapon upgrades and how it pertains to progress.
We've got our upgrade screens, and here's where we're taking some of our older gear that we picked up in the previous region, and we're going to upgrade it so that we're better equipped to fight the enemies here.
Yeah, Sporlings.
Yeah,
Exactly.
coming back.
Oh, yeah.
So it's interesting to see how the weapon upgrade looks. If you look on the left here, you can see your weapons. You can see what looks like, I'm guessing, probably the weight of the weapon. And if you look over here on the right, like with these two cutlass, you can see that this is probably the stats down here, the stun, the physical damage, and whatnot. But I think what they mean when they say upgrades is if you look down here, you see select upgrade, find quality, and it's highlighted green. If you look up at the weapon, the cutlass, it's also green. So I'm assuming what this means is that when you upgrade this, it goes from common to fine to exceptional to legendary, and this down here is kind of the material you need to do that. I really like what I see here in this customization. This seems pretty cool. I'm pretty excited to actually try this out. I think it is great to have this in Avowed because it allows another layer of customization, and personally I really like customization in my RPGs, so the more the better. Another thing to mention as it pertains to weapons and progression is weapon enchantments.
But you'll have, weapons, your own abilities, spells, weapon enchantments, sometimes even your companions who can, use their environmental abilities.
Now, they obviously didn't give us a lot of details here, and you have to wonder how this coincides with the weapon upgrades as they mentioned. Now, I imagine for the weapon enchantments, it's probably going to be something like we've seen in other RPGs of this type, kind of like if you put a frost enchantment on your sword, or you put a shock enchantment on there, and it shocks or freezes your enemy. On this next part, Obsidian gives us some information on how the leveling actually works in Avowed.
Yeah, so you can upgrade your skills and abilities anywhere as you level up throughout the course of the game. That's one of the things we're doing right now.
So it's actually cool seeing these attributes here, and this is what I like to see in a good RPG game. You can see you have might, constitution, dexterity, perception, right? All the typical stuff that you see. And one thing I find interesting here is if you look at each attribute, it seems like they have two things tied to them. So if we look at might, for example, it seems like that's going to involve damage and carry weight. And if you look at constitution, health and resistance, dexterity, attack speed, and action speed. So it's pretty cool that they have this kind of classic RPG style system in regards to the attributes. And something else I want to point out here in regard to the attributes is if you guys look over here, the numbers seem kind of small, right? And this is something I really like. I don't like these gigantic numbers. I like it to be a lot more simple. Maybe I'm just a little dumb, but I like kind of having those traditional like Dungeons and Dragons numbers, right? Where it's like 2 or 10 or 14, not like Diablo 3 where you had like 10 million damage. I'm just not a big fan of those type of numbers. Just a personal taste thing.
So on certain level up milestones, we'll get to upgrade our attributes which we just did, and on every level up milestone, we'll get to pick a new ability.
So that's interesting. It seems like each skill kind of has like a rank, and then each rank you level up the skill, that makes it more powerful. Like this one here, you can see there's 3 diamond shapes. So I'm assuming that means there's 3 different upgrades for that particular skill. That's pretty cool. I like that. So we can kind of see how the leveling kind of works in Avowed. And this next part I want to talk about is still about the leveling. They showed us the attributes and how some of the skills kind of work and how you can level those skills up. But the next thing I want to show you here is, before I kind of thought Avowed was going to be more of a freestyle system like Skyrim, because they had constantly been mentioning like flexibility and versatility. And in their prior game, Pillars of Eternity, you were either locked to a single class or you could multi-class. And I was kind of skeptical on the free class system. And what you're going to see here as them addressing how the classes are going to work in Avowed.
So we're spending these on different abilities in our different trees, and one of the really fun things about the way these are set up is you can really mix and match freely between them. So if you want to be all wizard, you can, build entirely throughout that skill tree. If you want to mix and match, make a battle mage, or make, someone who can be a little stealthy in certain moments and a little more aggressive in others, you have a lot of freedom to do that.
Now that's interesting, because it's kind of still like a free class system in the sense that it seems like you can bounce around from different classes and use different abilities from a fighter or a wizard. So it's not exactly like Skyrim. Maybe it's kind of like an in-between. Like you're not just using whatever skill that you want. Not that I hated the system in Skyrim. There is something about choosing a class, and being like an assassin or a warrior that kind of feels cool. I don't know. Now I want to go back to what they showed us earlier, because there was something that I noticed. And as you guys can see here, they never mention how many classes there's going to exactly be. But if we look at the top here, we can see there's going to be, it looks like a fighter, a ranger, a wizard, and a godlike. Now the godlike is something that I think everybody has. Like everybody has the godlike ability tree. But yeah, essentially it seems like you have 3 classes to pick from. Part of me kind of wishes that they maybe had one more class to pick from, but this isn't bad by any means. And this might have been one of those things where they kind of scaled it back in order to keep the game more linear or maybe refine other things. So I'm perfectly okay with this. So I love what I'm seeing from Avowed here in regards to the character progression system. They have all the things that I love in my fantasy RPGs. They have the skill trees, attributes. They have the classes that you can choose from that also allow you flexibility. So overall, this is really freaking awesome, and I'm really excited. And the next thing I want to talk about here is the companions in Avowed. So we already know before about Giada and Kai, and they introduced a new companion, Yatsli. And what I like about this is Obsidian talks a lot about how these companions are going to have different types of personalities and how the decisions you make are going to affect the companions in the world, and how perhaps you're going to have to do some conflict resolution between the companions and yourself. And they also mention how some of your party members are going to have banter that may go on in the camp, or it may perhaps go on while you're with your companions. And I think this is great. And as I've said before, one of the games to do this the best was Dragon Age back in its heyday, when you had party members that would banter or talk to you in camp, and they had in-depth stories, and they really felt like real characters in the game that you could connect with. So I really like what Obsidian is going for with this and Avowed. So on some other things, Obsidian also confirmed that there's going to be a party camp where you do your leveling. They're going to also have an upgrade hub, a narrative hub there, and they confirmed you can talk to your companions in this camp. This is where you kind of rest, level up, get to know your companions, all those types of things that a lot of times come along with RPG games like this. And the last thing I want to talk about here is the dialogue in Avowed. Now prior to this, they had told us that you'd have many dialogue options in Avowed, and that some of the decisions that you made in Avowed would affect the story and have real impact on the world. So it kind of left me wanting to know more about the dialogue in Avowed, and thankfully they gave us some new information about the dialogue, as you can see here.
The great things about your game is, of course, dialogue options. Tell us a little bit about how that's playing here.
So you noticed with a couple of those that we had a little symbol at the front of those options. So as this is an Obsidian game, some of the options available to you are dictated by choices you make at character creation, choices you make as you level up your character. So some of them are tied to specific attributes. Some of them are tied to specific backgrounds that you choose at the beginning of the game.
So this is some great info about how the dialogue works in Avowed. And as she said, you have these symbols that are tied to attributes. And we've seen some of the attributes earlier, and I'm assuming like this one here with, looks like he kind of has a spyglass, that maybe that's tied to perception, right? Maybe if you have a high perception, this will kind of influence the dialogue here. And then if you look down here, it's like a person flexing. I'm assuming that has something to do with a might. Maybe the higher your might is, it influences how this dialogue option works. And one other thing I want to point out here is if you go down to the bottom, you see an option to flirt. And I actually love that you have that as an option, because I feel like this adds an awesome dynamic to the world and how you think about your relationships and how you approach your companions. This has all the things I would love to have in dialogue, and I can't wait to try it out. So I am super excited, as it seems like Obsidian has all the ingredients for a good recipe for a great RPG game. And probably the only thing I'm concerned about based off what I've kind of seen here is that it does seem still a little cartoonish, and I typically like my RPGs to be a little more dark and gritty, but I'm willing to forgive that because everything I'm seeing here looks great. The dialogue, the story, the way your progression system looks, it has all the things that I usually love in an RPG, and I am super excited. I cannot wait to get my hands on this game, but I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Let me know in the comments below. What do you guys think of Avowed? Is there some things that maybe you don't like that you've seen in the footage of Avowed? I'd love to hear what you guys think. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you all on the next one.